The newest franchise in the NBA, the Oklahoma City Thunder, were relocated from Seattle in 2008 following the Sonics' struggle to raise funding for their new arena, and following Hurricane Katrina in 2005, the New Orleans Hornets had to play in OKC for 2 seasons as their home city faced tons of damage and destruction. This rallied the state of Oklahoma and the city, finally getting the taste of their first pro team, with rookie point guard Chris Paul leading the way, and the home crowd was instantly electric. Supporting a team that wasn't technically their own, but surely treated it as such, Oklahoma City seemed to be the perfect market for a pro team, and with Seattle denying the money to build a new arena, it just seemed like fate. And on September 3rd, 2008, the Oklahoma City Thunder became official, bringing in not just an NBA team, but soon to be some of the top stars in the league, a sophomore Kevin Durant, who had just locked up Rookie of the Year in Seattle, along with Russell Westbrook from UCLA, who had just showed endless upside with his explosive athleticism and speed. In the current year of 2025, they became one of the most dominant regular season teams of all time, winning 68 games, having the highest point differential of all time, led by the MVP and scoring leader in gilgeous-alexander. But only the die-hard and faithful fans could have expected what was coming for this rediscovered franchise. Hello everyone, I'm Mason, and with the Thunder winning this year's NBA championship, let's take a look at the complete Oklahoma City Thunder story. Make sure to drop a like, sub if you have not already. I would appreciate it a lot, and not just that, I'll let you have a drink of my Strawbango Ghost if you would like one. As for the beginning of this young franchise, the start would be kind of rough, with a disgusting 3-29 start to their first season, along with firing head coach PJ Carlesimo and picking up Scott Brooks to do the job instead. The team would end up finishing 23-59, which wasn't too bad, honestly, and Scott Brooks would sign to become the team's full-time head coach going forward. KD would improve tremendously, his shot creation ability would improve as well, his efficiency would go crazy, his three-point percentage went from 29 up to 42 in just the span of 1 year, and in their first year they would average a 98% capacity at the Ford Center, showing that even though their team was struggling, they had a very reliable crowd. So going into the 2009-2010 season, they were looking a lot better. They would pick up James Harden with a 3rd pick in the draft, which showed a lot of flashes of being a great scorer and creator off the dribble, as well as being able to facilitate and run an offense. And this 2009-2010 season would be the beginning of this true big three for the Thunder. Kevin Durant would end up winning the scoring title, the youngest player in NBA history to do so, averaging 30, and the Thunder would finish 50-32. In today's league, 50-32 was good enough for 3rd in the Western Conference, shout out Lakers, but in 2010, 50-32 was only good enough for the 8th seed, as they would have a 3-way tie with the Spurs and Trailblazers. Now, they would go up against a Kobe and Powell-led Lakers in the first round, in which they would fall in 6 games, who would then go on to win the NBA title. But this was only the beginning for this young crew. And going into 2011, they kind of ran it back. They obviously had some very young talent that was very affordable at the time, which we would see later on would come back to bite them. But for now, the Thunder going into 2010-2011 would finish 55-27 as the 4 seed. And this is when we truly got to see Kevin Durant shine in a playoff setting, as in the series against the Nuggets, in which they would win in 5 games in their first round matchup. He would average stats of 32, 5.5, 3.5 on 47% from the field and 43% from 3. Now heading into the second round, they would play against the Grizzlies, grit and grind team, who had just taken down the 1 seed Spurs, and the Thunder would fight this out, an absolute dogfight, winning in 7 games to head to the Western Conference Finals. And for the second year in a row, the Thunder would fall to the team that would go on to win the title, being the Dallas Mavericks, in just 5 games. Now, one of the main things being visible, a glaring issue with this team, was just some of their depth at times, as well as defenses being able to very easily predict and throw several double teams at Kevin Durant, knowing that he was going to be their primary scoring option. Him and Westbrook face a lot of very tough coverages. And going into the 2012 season, this was looking like it was really the Thunder's year. Because of the lockout NBA season, the teams would only end up playing 66 games, and the Thunder would finish 47-19, good enough for the 2nd best record in the Western Conference that year, behind, again, the San Antonio Spurs. Spurs. And it was during this time the Thunder would really start to take the league by storm, no pun intended. Kevin Durant and Westbrook both getting all-star nods in this season, as well as James Harden winning the 6th Man of the Year award, and he was exactly the spark that they needed depth-wise. It was in this playoffs that the Thunder would finally start to really look dominant. They would breeze their way through the first 2 rounds against the Mavs and the Lakers before heading against the Spurs, in which they would go down 0-2, losing both games in San Antonio, before going on to reverse sweep and win the next 4 straight games, and Oklahoma City had never been so excited, reaching their first ever professional team championship. They would go on to face none other than the Big 3 Miami Heat, Big 3 versus Big 3, and going into this series, a lot of people actually viewed the Thunder as the favorites. With LeBron's recent choke in the 2011 finals, they didn't think this Big 3 Miami Heat could get the job done, and they viewed the Big 3 of the Thunder with Harden's production off the bench to be too much. And well, in the first game, it certainly appeared so. They would take game 1 having home court advantage versus the Heat, in which Kevin Durant would put up 36 points. Unfortunately for the Thunder, they did not end up finding another win in this series. Now, James Harden would actually notedly not play very good in this series outside of a game 2 in which he had 21. Other than that, he was not very efficient from the field, and the Heat made it their mission to kind of shut him down. And unfortunately, the Heat would take it in 5 games. And as we mentioned before, with money issues, this is when they really came to bite going into the 2012-2013 season. In this offseason, they would sign Serge Ibaka to a 4-year, $48 million deal. Obviously worth it. He was incredible. He was a very great defender, and he was that rim protector they needed. But unfortunately, they would not want to pay James Harden. They didn't want to pay the luxury tax. They would trade him at the end of this deal to the Rockets, and the return they got was not good at all. Kevin Martin, Jeremy Lamb, and 2 first-rounders. As we could see, obviously, they made a huge mistake not bringing back Harden. He would go on to Houston and have easily his best year of his career, his first all-star nod, and he would average 26 a night. Now, it was this season that the Thunder would take their first ever 60-win season, taking the top seed in the West, and it was this year they played against, well, the Rockets, against James Harden, and in this series, the Thunder were obviously easily favored, a 1 versus 8 matchup. In game 2 of this series, after the Thunder being up 1-0, Russell Westbrook dribbles the ball towards the sideline. He's going to call a timeout. Well, Pat Bev, the sneaky little dog he is, dives in at the ball and takes out Westbrook's knee in the process, tearing his meniscus. A lot of people saw this as Patrick Beverley being extremely dirty, and this would pretty much single-handedly take out the Thunder's chances going into this playoff run. They would end up beating the Rockets in 6 before losing in just 5 games to the Grizzlies because they obviously had no Westbrook, so it was pretty much the Kevin Durant show. Now, going into this offseason, they would pick up Steven Adams to kind of fill the void of Kendrick Perkins, obviously just not being very good at all. They would make a draft night trade to pick up Andre Roberson, who was a very good lockdown perimeter defender, as we saw, along with drafting the sniper Alex Abrinas in the 2nd round. Now, it was around 2012 or 2013 that I was first introduced to the Thunder. Growing up in Oklahoma, but moving away after 2010, I would still go back and see my family, and around 2012, it was either in this finals run or maybe in the 2013 playoffs when my grandma had actually been watching them play, so because of her, I was introduced to the team, and obviously Kevin Durant was easily my favorite player growing up. The Thunder would continue dominating right where they left off, despite missing Westbrook for a lot of time during this season, obviously from his meniscus tear in the playoffs. They would finish with a 59-23 record, just a game worse than the year before. Kevin Durant would take home his first and only regular season MVP award, averaging stats of 32 points, also winning the scoring title, 7.5 rebounds and 5.5 assists on 50, 39, and 87 splits, easily his best season of his entire career. It was in this 2014 playoffs that the Thunder would fight their way through these first 2 rounds, once again playing against the Grizzlies, beating them in 7, before going to play against Lob City and beating them in 6 in the 2nd round. They would head into the conference finals against the Spurs, and yet again, they lose to the team that would end up going on to win the finals. So as we can tell, the Thunder just seemed literally 1 step away from winning the championship in 3 separate seasons. And while the 2014-2015 season, we could tell, did not end up being anywhere near what the hype was about for the Thunder. Going into this season, Kevin Durant suffered a Jones fracture in his right foot, missed a lot at the beginning of the season, and would continue missing more time, and then by the end of the year, he would end up having his foot surgery. So Kevin Durant would only end up playing in 27 games in the season. Westbrook would actually take on the scoring title, averaging 28 points a night in this season. His efficiency was not good, and the Thunder would actually end up missing the playoffs. And Westbrook would actually end up being 4th in the MVP voting, which was also a telltale sign of what was to come for his potential. And after his longer tenure in Oklahoma City, Scott Brooks would end up being fired after they would end up missing the playoffs. And with their first season having Billy Donovan as a head coach, they would go 55-27, third in the Western Conference. Now, this team's star power-wise was very sharp. However, they did not find very much scoring production out of anyone else on the roster. Enes Freedom would provide them some solid help off the bench. Steven Adams was emerging as their go-to big man, and Andre Roberson was still that perimeter defender that they needed. But three-point shooting-wise, this team was actually pretty bad. Outside of Kevin Durant, they did not have any sort of reliable three-point shooting at all, and it would kind of come back to bite them in the playoffs. See, this is the season, though, that a lot of people just saw them as another team there. Obviously, the Spurs were 67 wins, only lost one game at home all year. Going into that series, obviously, the Thunder were not favored. Now, the Spurs would go up 2-1 in the series, riding the high scoring of LaMarcus Aldridge. The Thunder did not really have an answer for him, as between the first 2 games of the series, he would put up a whopping 79 points. Now, luckily, the two-headed duo of KD and Russ were enough to overcome the Spurs team, sending it home in 6 games in the second round, before the Thunder would go on to the 2016 conference finals against none other than the 73-win Golden State Warriors. And, well, the rest is history. Thunder go up 3-1, and Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook both had very rough last 3 games of this series. Super inefficient, terrible scoring nights for both of them, and they would end up blowing it, along with historic performances from Steph and Clay. Now, fun fact about this time, I would have been 12 years old during this playoff run. I was wearing my Russell Westbrook jersey eating at a restaurant, and the waiter came up to me and asked, am I a Thunder fan? I was like, oh yeah. He's like, how are they doing right now? I said, well, they're up 3-1 against the Warriors, so they're doing really good and they're gonna win. He's like, well, what if the Warriors come back? I said, they won't. And yeah, they did. That still stings me to this day, and that is the hugest stain, I think, on not only the Thunder's legacy, that was also the last time we saw Kevin Durant in a Oklahoma City Thunder uniform. He would take off to join the team they just lost to. Now, despite the harsh criticism for all the Kevin Durant drama, Russell Westbrook was locked in on the season. He would have, by far, his best season in the NBA, averaging 31, 10, and 10, a triple-double average, first time since the Big O did it a billion years ago, including hitting the game winner buzzer beater from 36 feet out against the Nuggets to record his 42nd triple-double of the season, also an all-time NBA record for most triple-doubles in a year. It was easy to see the impact he had. He was literally the offensive system. Without him, the Thunder were god-awful. They would end up being a 6th seed, and unfortunately, they'd be taken out by the Rockets in the first round in just 5 games, and every time Russ hit the bench, the Thunder would instantly start losing the game. Dark times for the Thunder seemed to be coming. It wasn't sure if Russ was going to hang around, what the Thunder were going to do with Victor Oladipo or Domantas Sabonis, who was trying to be used as a stretch big. Well, we would come to find out to this day that that is not at all what his role was going to be in the league. But regardless, the Thunder would trade in 2017 offseason to pick up Paul George in a trade with Sabonis and Oladipo. Even better, the Thunder also acquired Carmelo Anthony from the Knicks, who obviously was declining in the later years of his career. So it seemed like things were pretty good. They had formed a new big 3 shortly after the departure of Kevin Durant, and the Thunder would sign Russell Westbrook to a 5-year deal. In 2018, obviously picking up Paul George and Carmelo Anthony, Russell Westbrook's scoring numbers would decline, but he would average a triple-double for the 2nd season in a row. Now, Carmelo Anthony was a little shaky at this time. His actual shot creation ability had been declining a little bit, and the Thunder used him a little more as kind of a spot-up shooter at times, which actually wasn't the worst thing ever. However, in the playoffs, he would falter a lot. The Thunder would be taken out by the Jazz in just 6 games in the first round, including some very ugly performances from all 3, Russ, PG, and Melo. Now, Paul George would re-sign with the Thunder, and luckily, they were able to pick up Dennis Schroeder in a deal that dished out Melo, because he just was not a great fit for the team. And going into 2019, shooting, Paul George would end up having his best year of his entire career. He would put up stats of 28 a night, along with 8 rebounds, 4 assists, and lead the league with 2.2 steals a game, finishing third in MVP voting. Now, the Thunder would end up 49-33 with the 6th seed again, and unfortunately, they would go home in one of the most disgusting, disrespectful, buzzer-beating fashions, probably in NBA history. We all know the Dame shot. And this Damian Lillard shot is actually credited with the Thunder becoming what they are today, and sparking the entire team would spiral into a rebuild. This is the darkest time easily in Oklahoma City Thunder history. They would ship out Paul George to the Clippers, and in one of the most one-sided trades that we've seen, the Thunder would receive Danilo Gallinari, a huge bucket of first-round picks, and none other than SGA, who at this time was just a solid young guard with a lot of potential. They got rid of Russ in order to get Chris Paul from the Rockets, teaming up Westbrook and Harden once again, along with 2 more future first-round picks. Now, Chris Paul would actually be very important to the future of this team, as we could see now especially. He is a big part of the reason that Shea developed into the guard he is today, and some of his very smart decision-making. Kind of coming around to 2020, the Thunder would end up making the NBA bubble, and unfortunately would get knocked out in 7 games to the Rockets in a very hard-fought close series, and Lou Dort as well would have an incredible performance in Game 7 with a 30 ball. Now, luckily, they were kind of able to move their pieces around even more. Chris Paul was shipped out after the bubble loss. Billy Donovan was fired. Mark Daignault was promoted. They were finally formulating this young roster around Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. They traded away Steven Adams, Dennis Schroeder, Gallinari, and they just hit the reset button. They would pick up Al Horford. They traded him away. They got Kemba Walker. And in all of these trades, the biggest trend is that they were picking up first-round picks. So by the end of 2021, they had actually built up a total of 36 picks in 7 years, along with 18 of those being first rounders. The future looked very bright for them. They would select Josh Giddey in 2021, along with Sengun, who would be traded to the Rockets for, well, 2 more picks, and they would get Trey Mann as well. They would sign Shea to a 5-year, $172 million deal, and 2021 was still seen as their obvious tanking season, including a game where they lost by 73 to the Memphis Grizzlies, the largest loss in NBA history. Josh Giddey would show his flashes with the offensive side, being a very good transition playmaker, and offensively, he obviously needed to improve his shooting. Josh Giddey would actually end up proving to be a very pivotal piece, as we would see soon to come. They would finish the season of 2022 with a 24-58 record, obviously missing the playoffs and securing their spot number 2 in the NBA draft, selecting big man Chet Holmgren from Gonzaga. He would miss his entire first season with a Lisfranc fracture in his foot during a pro-am game. They would also draft not just 1, but 2 dudes named Jalen Williams. Obviously, the more important one being J-Dub, who would go on to become the Thunder's second option, and he would prove to be a very good scoring option, and not just that, but his efficiency in his first 2 seasons was something to marvel about. Finishing second in his Rookie of the Year campaign, just behind Paolo Banchero, and in his second year, he would actually finish shooting 54% from the field and almost 43% from 3, being around 6'5" to 6'6", with a very long wingspan and incredible athleticism, using his wingspan to be a very good tool defensively, as we've seen now that he has become one of the best 2-way wings that we have in today's game. Now, it was in this 2023 season, they would finish with the 10th record in the West, and this would actually bring a lot more excitement to the team than you would think. When you have a guy like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander averaging 30 points a game, making the All-Star team, it looks so good going forward for this team, being a 40-win team without their number 2 overall pick. Shai would also end up making the All-NBA first team and finishing 5th in the MVP despite his team's bad record. They would win their first play-in matchup against the Pelicans before falling to the Timberwolves, and especially after Shai caught a mean elbow from Rudy Gobert. And the 2024 season was something that not a single person expected, even including myself. I personally thought the Thunder going into the season could end up as high as 5 or 6 in the standings, and no one could have guessed that they would end up number 1 with a 57-win season, and actually the second best record in the NBA, just behind the Boston Celtics. Now, this was the rookie campaign for Chet Holmgren, and Chet Holmgren actually was very impactful on the defensive side of the ball for this team, averaging 2.3 blocks a game as a rookie, and he would also end up second in the Rookie of the Year behind Victor Wembanyama, who was again the obvious favorite. Unfortunately for this Thunder team, though, they would kind of go out bad in the second round against the Dallas Mavericks. It just didn't look right for them. They had Josh Giddey, who got played off the floor because of his offensive negativity, not being able to shoot, on top of being a very negative defender in which he would get hunted at times and he could just not keep up on the perimeter. Chet Holmgren would get bullied down low and give up a lot of rebounds to Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively, which we could see that the Thunder needed a guy that could go out and snag boards, with Chet being a little undersized with a thin frame. But going into 24-25, again, a lot of people realized that this team was very young with lots of time to improve, and that's exactly what they did. They'd make several moves, such as giving up Treyman, Bertans, and Poku to grab the expiring deal of Gordon Hayward, who would then obviously be cut. They would end up getting Isaiah Hartenstein, a big guy who was a very good playmaker who could help run the offense, could rebound very well next to Chet Holmgren, which was again one of the weaknesses. And by far their biggest deal of this season was trading away Josh Giddey 1-for-1 for Alex Caruso. And actually it kind of worked out for both teams, as Josh Giddey would have a very great season this year for the Chicago Bulls, but Alex Caruso's championship pedigree, true defensive impact, along with being a reliable shooter in the playoffs, was something that the Thunder really desperately needed, and he has constantly proved exactly why that trade mattered for the Thunder. And well, things would start off a little rough this season for the Thunder anyways. They would end up losing Isaiah Hartenstein during the beginning of the preseason, which kept him out for a lot of the beginning of the season, leaving Chet to play by himself. Well, it didn't really matter because at the time the Thunder would actually play very well, and Chet Holmgren looked solid. However, he would go down in an early game against the Golden State Warriors with a horrific hip injury that happened in November that would end up sidelining him until February. During his absence, Isaiah Hartenstein would prove to be very valuable for this team. So many people, including myself, were still very excited to see what the duo of Chet and Isaiah Hartenstein looked like together. After several rough games for the Thunder in which J-Dub actually had to play the center position, and he actually looked very solid out there, and including a couple games where he was able to take advantage and even shut down the opposing center. Hartenstein would finally make his return. His ability to set solid screens proved to be one of their best dynamics of offense during this time, and even J-Dub was able to start getting downhill even more due to his ability to screen and roll. The Thunder would historically dominate their way through the season, winning 68 games, also having the highest point differential of all time in this season. Shea taking home the MVP award on top of the scoring title, averaging 32.7 points a game. The Thunder defense was historic, and they were swarming. They forced so many turnovers in ways that we haven't seen before. Guys like Lou Dort making all defensive first team, as well as J-Dub making the second team, showed that this team had so much defensive versatility to throw at the other team's best player, with several times making superstars seriously struggle. They would head into the playoffs being the championship favorites, and they would live up to all expectations. In the first round, they would take care of business, knocking out the Memphis Grizzlies, sweeping them in the process, before going into a Denver series in which the Thunder would go down 2-1 in this series. Shea would have the little grin, and the rest is history. They would come back, take a 3-2 lead before taking Game 7 in a very dominant blowout fashion. This was their true test of seeing if they were championship caliber, championship pedigree in their DNA, and they had everything that we were looking for. They would head into the Timberwolves series. They had the defensive matchups figured out against a guy like Julius Randle. Even Anthony Edwards, they were able to shut him down, deny him the ball a lot of the time, but especially Randle had a horrific couple games in the series in which he got played off the floor and benched in the fourth quarter. They would send the Wolves packing in just 5 games. I was lucky enough to see Game 5 in person, and my goodness, if you have the chance to, please go experience the Paycom Center, the Thunder atmosphere, if you get a chance to, even if you're not a fan. And going into the finals against the Indiana Pacers, people called it boring. How would you call the #1 offense versus versus the #1 defense, an incredibly fast-paced team versus one of the best defenses this league has ever seen, on top of the MVP himself being on that team. How would you call that matchup boring? The Pacers have found their way through multiple matchups in which they were down 15 to 20 points, come back, Halliburton, bang, game winner. And this was a finals matchup that I knew going into it was gonna be worth all the hype. In game 1, we got a game winner from Tyrese Halliburton following a comeback again from Indiana. Game 2, the Thunder would sneak by in a pretty convincing fashion, going back to Indiana, tied 1-1. It was after these first 2 games the Pacers would make an adjustment. They would send more double teams at Shea, especially blitzing him off of screens, and this method actually worked as the Pacers figured out that the Thunder's three-point shooting was not reliable. The Pacers would take game 3 before game 4, in which they had a loss that was very similar to Oklahoma City's loss in game 1. Now game 5, Oklahoma City would come out and they would dominate from start to finish, and game 6 was a similar way for Indiana. Both teams had a blowout going in and leading up to this game 7 where everything was on the line. Both teams looking for their first championship. And with Oklahoma City having home court advantage, they were able to prevail. And finally, at last, all the tension had built up, all the pressure had been relieved, a cork off of the bottle. In a literal and figurative sense, the Thunder could finally celebrate after so many years, getting so close, but being yet so far. And the 2025 NBA champions are your Oklahoma City Thunder. And well, that completes the story for now.